So, just a few weeks ago, Father Alex and I took Sebastian, our seminarian, on a hike. We went to Cape Split, which is this beautiful hike that overlooks the Bay of Fundy. And it was a perfect day, sunshine, the colors were changing, and so we decided to do the full loop, which is almost 15 kilometers. And if you've never done it before, you hike out about 7 or 8 kilometers to the end, and then suddenly it's like Lord of the Rings. You're in Middle Earth, and the cliffs are just epic. So I took a few photos just to show you. So here's me, trying not to look tired. Then on the other cliff across, you have Sebastian, our seminarian, and then our not-so-baby priest. He's still pretty tiny, though. And then here's another beautiful shot. And again, don't be distracted by the hair. Anyways, we hiked out, and I had estimated we'd be finished this hike around 1 o'clock or so. I'm not particularly good at guessing times, and it was closer to 3:30 by the time we finished. And so we hadn't had lunch, we were famished, started driving, and Father Alex is Googling places to eat. And at this point, I was so hungry, I was even willing to lower myself to McDonald's. But even that wasn't nearby. And so the only place you could find, he said, look, I found this place in Canning. It's called Filthy Phillies. And so, sure, at this point, we'll take anything. We drive up. It turns out it's a little fast food joint inside of a gas station. And so naturally, I'm going to order a donair poutine. And I just hiked 15 kilometers, so I had to balance out, all that time in the fresh air with, a little bit of indulgence. And the thing that struck me when we walked in was there were about 5 or 6 staff, all young people, who were it was like they were waiting for us. Every single one of them greeted us. They were joyful, they were kind, patient as we put in our orders. They worked well together. After I ordered, I stepped outside to stretch my aching muscles. And one of the guys, he actually came out to the parking lot with my donair poutine. And then at the end, he says, hey guys, thanks so much for coming today. I mean, it was over the top, but it was so genuine, it was so authentic. And now I want to tell everybody about Filthy Phillies in Canning. The filthier, the better. But it's just so incredible, right? This artery clogging and yet delicious poutine. The service is incredible. I just felt at home. And I think it's ironic because here we were at this fast food joint inside of a gas station, and yet the way that these people served joyfully together is in some ways more edifying than the way I've witnessed service in many churches. Now, we're in this series called Pick Up an Oar, and it's all about the universal call to serve. That every single one of us who long to be disciples, followers of Jesus, part and parcel with that is to serve others. And we see that right on our game plan in purple. But if we're honest, isn't it the case that some of us hesitate when it comes to serving in ministry? And there might be several reasons for that. Maybe for some, we just didn't know that we were called to serve. Or we didn't know that there was a need. I mean, you show up here, and you're like, well, it seems like all the roles are filled by people. Maybe you're thinking to yourself, my job is to come here, and Father, it's your job to do all the other stuff. Maybe with the help of a few staff and a few dedicated parishioners. But no, all of us have this call to serve. Maybe for some, you struggle with self-doubt. You're thinking, well, I don't have any gifts. I don't have anything to offer. And I just want to say this. That's one of the ways in which the enemy can get us down. To make us think, yeah, I'm not like all those other more talented people. But in the body of Christ, every member matters. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 12. He's using this image of literally a body, and I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, the eyeball shouldn't say to the earlobe, you're not that important. Or the kidney shouldn't say to the spleen, we can get by without you. No, it's like every single person matters. And we have different gifts, but they're meant to complement each other. Now, for some, maybe it's that you're busy. And I know that there's many people who you go through a busy season. I think of parents with lots of young children. And yet, what I've come to discover is every season of life is busy in its own way. And yet, I know busy people who still prioritize this call to serve. And finally, for some, maybe you've had a bad experience. Maybe you tried to serve in the past, and something happened you were taken advantage of, or you kind of burned out. And I think back to earlier in the pandemic where there were so few people, and some people, they literally served every single week. And it costs them a lot. And that's the case even to today. There's a few people who, there's just such a need, and some people have to serve every single week. Now, maybe, again, you weren't aware of the call or the need. You have self-doubt. You're busy. You've had a bad experience. But nevertheless, the call that Jesus has on our lives, if we are to follow him, is to serve others. And I feel confident that this isn't just like a Father Simon thing, but that this really comes from God. It's how he operates. He calls people together to serve for the victory. And we see that expressed in our first reading today. We have the story of the Exodus, right, where these people, they're in slavery in Egypt for over 400 years. And then God sends Moses to lead them out of slavery, to cross the Red Sea. That happens actually in Exodus chapter 14. And here we are in Exodus 17. So it's just like these early moments of the people trying to survive in the desert. And then, out of nowhere, this local tribe attacks them. So it says, then Amalek came and fought with Israel at Rephidim. So Israel's very existence is under threat. It's a question of self-defense. Amalek attacks, Israel responds, and then Moses, he goes up on this hill and he's holding up his staff, and it seems like when the staff is raised up, they're winning. When it's lowered, they're losing. But eventually, they win. And I see in this, it's an analogy, but I see in this, it's all about teamwork. People serving together for the victory. So here's at least 4 groups of Israelites who come together to win victory. Joshua. So first of all, Joshua, he's the general who's overseeing all the troops. Then you've got all the men who join in the fight, right? These were people for generations, they were slaves. So they're not trained professionals, they're not warriors, but they're willing to fight. And then Moses, the spiritual leader who's up on a hill, the symbol of hope, who's praying and interceding. And even when he grows weary, he's got Aaron and Hur by his side to support him, to hold his arms up so that they can continue to pray and intercede for the victory. Now again, the point is Joshua couldn't have won the battle by himself. Moses couldn't have found victory on his own. Even if Joshua and Moses had worked together, it wouldn't have been enough. Every single one of them had to come together to serve for the victory. And I guess the way I would summarize it is this: when we serve together, we win together. Just say that with me. When we serve together, we win together. And again, all of this, it's an analogy. This is not about a physical fight or violence or war, but an analogy in the way that God works. He calls people together for the victory. And the victory, for us here at St. Benedict, it's a victory for souls. That people who find themselves lost or hurting, that we would overcome them, we would fight with love, that they may come to know Jesus. That we would create a space where people would feel welcome, where they could belong and discover Jesus and then grow in their faith and fall in love with the church and then long to serve other people in turn for this same victory. That St. Benedict Parish would be explosively alive, that our love that comes from God would extend beyond the walls of the church and impact so many people in our community. And for that to happen, it can't just depend on on one person like a Moses, or even on two people like a Moses and Joshua, or Father Simon and Father Alex, Batman and Robin. I'll let you decide who's who. But it will depend on all of us. The entire church coming together and saying, I'm willing to pick up an oar. I believe in the mission that God has entrusted to St. Benedict. And I want to be part of it. I don't want to just sit back and let other people do all the work for me. As I'm along for the ride passively, I want in. I want to pick up an oar to help. And hopefully, it's not just out of obligation, but really freely, and that it would bring joy. You know, when I think of this phrase, pick up an oar, two images come to mind. On the one hand, you have like a slave ship, right? Think of Ben-Hur, where people are chained to an oar and they're forced to pull at the sound of the drum, right? Or, on the other hand, you have this image of an Olympic rowing team, where people freely have chosen to commit themselves wholeheartedly for the sake of victory. On the first hand, it's utilitarian, but on the second hand, we're talking about people living out this maxim that when we serve together, we win together. So today, after Mass, there's going to be people in the foyer wearing t-shirts. They're going to be wearing t-shirts either purple or green, representing the serve others or the go out parts of the game plan. And my ask to you is to linger for a few minutes to chat with them. If you're watching online, you can chat with somebody in one of the hosts in the chat, or you can just go to our website and figure out there's a tab on how you can get involved as well. But I just encourage you, for 5 or 10 minutes after Mass today, get in a conversation with somebody. Ask a question. I don't know what to do. I'd like to help. How do I pick up an oar? And they'd be happy to chat about various opportunities that might fit the very gifts that God has given you. Now, I recognize that there's several groups of people here today. Some of you, you're already serving. And I just want to say thank you. Now, maybe God has given you capacity and you feel, yeah, I can do more. I feel like God is asking me to give more. And maybe it's time to pick up a bigger oar or an additional oar. And we'd love to chat about that. Or maybe some of you used to serve before and you took a break, perhaps because of the pandemic, and we totally understand. But you're feeling, you know what, it's time for me to pick up an oar again. Or for others, you haven't served at all, or maybe you're more recent to our parish, just in the last couple of years or so, and you didn't know about the beautiful culture of service that has existed here at St. Benedict's for many years, that prior to the pandemic, based on our weekend attendance, approximately 2/3 of the people were serving in ministry. Just think about that. If you would come to Mass, you look to your right, look to your left, they're both serving in some capacity in our parish. And we want to not miss out on the opportunity of allowing you to experience the joy it is to serve God. When we serve, we meet wonderful people. It changes us. It grows our faith. Church becomes far more meaningful, and we grow closer to Jesus. So you can pick up a coffee urn, or you can pick up a clipboard, or you can pick up a shift for adoration, or you can pick up a conversation, or literally drive to somebody's house and pick them up and drive them to Mass. Pick up an oar. I want to just end by celebrating a few people who have picked up an oar. People who are living this maxim: when we serve together, we win together. I think of Carlene, this young lady. She's in her mid-20s. She's not Catholic, but I guess it means you don't have to be Catholic to serve at St. Benedict's Parish. She's been serving in our cafe, and recently she felt called to step up in leadership, to say, you know what, I'd like to offer to help coordinate the cafe. So here she is picking up a bigger oar. Or I think back to Hurricane Fiona a few weeks back where we lost electricity the whole weekend. And here I was Saturday afternoon before Mass. We had not one, but two Mass coordinators show up. Brenda and Byron, both of them, making sure the doors were unlocked. Normally they'd turn on the lights, but I guess they were lighting candles everywhere, making sure all the rolls were filled. And Brenda, in fact, she didn't even have power at home. And still she came. Or that same afternoon, Mervyn, who oversees hospitality, he came in as well. And I was like, Mervyn, what are you doing here? Are you coming to Mass? He said, no, I'm coming to Mass tomorrow, but I just came to check in and see, is everything okay? And he helped me fill buckets of water so we can put them by the toilets to manually flush them. Or think of Marco and his crew who set up tables and chairs faithfully, this hidden and humble service so that all kinds of events can happen in our auditorium downstairs. Or I think of Shelley, this young mom who was gearing up to be on Alpha Team, and then her husband got deployed. And so she's got this little toddler. She can't come out in the evenings. And yet she shared that she has some tech skills. And so because of her, we're now going to be able to offer Alpha online in a couple of weeks. Or think of Ifeanyi, who took Alpha this past spring. He's come from Nigeria to study here in Halifax, and he's just recently joined our parish, but now he's on Alpha Team. He's serving in the audiovisual ministry. He's serving as a life group leader. He's picked up several oars. And I could go on and on. This is not an exhaustive list, but of people around here who have picked up an oar. And if you ask any of them, I guarantee you, they're not going to tell you, yeah, this oar that I'm carrying, it's so heavy. They're going to talk about what they get from serving, the joy, the way that it's impacted their faith, and they've met wonderful people and drawn closer to Jesus. As more people serve, more people come to know Jesus. When we serve together, we win together.